1st of March 2023. This Skidmark is one of those what the fuck moments, and I'm not going to try to be historically 100% correct and factually everything in line and in sequence. I'm just going to talk about my perception, and the title of this thing is Europe, what have you done? And it is, for me, sitting here at the southern tip of Africa, absolutely astounding to see what is happening in Europe. Now, after World War II, it was small towns like this that you see here on the picture in the rural areas. These little towns were where people had to pick up the pieces of their lives and rebuild. And a lot of the base rebuilding happened on small farms, and it happened in the towns, in bakeries and tailors and artisans making furniture and things like that, and blacksmiths working round the clock to make the tools and the equipment that is needed by the people to rebuild their lives. And these people worked hard, and they were administered by civil servants. Take note, civil servants were making sure that the administration of the communities and so were working, and everybody was working towards a common goal. Roads had to be rebuilt, bridges had to be rebuilt, railways, everything. Europe was in tatters. But all across Europe, it was ordinary people that worked hard to get out of that poverty after World War II. And as the years went by, blacksmith shops turned into engineering shops, and engineering shops turned into big assembly plants and things like that. And during all this time, as the economies were slowly but surely getting back, because the people, the ordinary people, knew that they had to work hard for a better future for their children. And that is what they did. And all the time as this growth happened, something else happened in the background. Civil servants turned into bureaucrats, and they changed from serving the public to ruling the public. They became an elite ruling class. And it wasn't long, and the bigger economies of Europe, the bureaucrats decided it's a good thing to form a common body. And the initial ideas of the EU was damn good. It was to make it possible for the participating countries to trade easier with one another, and that the people could move freely among them. So workers, qualified workers, could move to where their skills were needed and so forth. And it was working fine. But those bureaucrats in Brussels were getting big, fat and happy. And unbeknown to the civil population of Europe, those bureaucrats became corrupted and captured by the Americans. Because the Americans was not going to watch and see Europe grow big and strong independently, because that will be opposition for America. And as the European economies grew, they started getting cheap energy from their neighbor. They got natural resources from their neighbor that they could use in their manufacturing processes, And German brands became international brands that everybody across the globe respected and wanted to own because of quality and good design. But the bureaucrats were not happy. They were actually sitting there in Brussels, always figuring out more ways and creative ways to make the workers pay more taxes so that they can get better salaries and bigger bonuses and things like that. And under the instigation and guidance of the Americans, they started with their expansionism. And they started drawing the old East Bloc countries into the European Union. Why? Those countries could bring nothing positive to the European Union. They are actually foster children. That is what they are. Because the European Union has to finance them, specifically finance their bureaucrats and their social programs. But why did they pull them in? Because of NATO and the Americans. Because they were dead set on getting as close to the Russian borders as possible. And all the time when these things happened, the ordinary citizens of Europe were working and focusing on their own lives and the future of their children, and they did not pay attention to what these bureaucrats were doing. And then the problem started. The Ukraine issue popped up, and all of a sudden the dark satanic face of those bureaucrats were revealed. And they pumped billions of European taxes into Ukraine under instructions from Washington. The American government pumped billions in there. The European nations individually basically disarmed themselves, which in reality means that NATO is disarmed. And they ran out of money because the taxes paid by the European citizens could no longer finance all these expansionist dreams. So what did they do? Against the constitution of the EU, they started loaning money and they started printing more money. And the German industry, the backbone of the European Union. And now that industry is collapsing because your favorite partner has stuck a knife in your back. They blew up your gas pipes to Russia. And that was the Americans' plan all along, to separate Europe from Russia. They know that that would destroy Europe. But their aim is not Europe anymore. They want that anti-Russia federation, which is Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics. That is what they're after, because that will place them right on the border of the Russians. And once they've achieved that, they will ditch Europe. And Europe is going to become an impoverished, poor place. All the time, the ordinary workers did not pay attention to what's happening until they start losing their jobs. And then they look around themselves and they see this other monster that those bureaucrats has created for Europe. That immigrants. Those immigrants are there in their millions, diluting your culture, destroying your culture, and destroying the value systems that you had and that you built over many years. So today, Europe is in a precarious situation. They are starving on energy, all planned and manipulated by the neocons in the shithouse in Washington, and executed by that cabal sitting in Brussels. The ordinary European people must understand one thing. That cabal in Brussels care nothing for you. Nothing. You are just a number as far as they're concerned. As long as they get their big fat salaries and they can stand on the world stage and make all sorts of idiotic statements. You, Europeans, have given your lives to the bureaucrats. And you will most probably pay with that life, because they are dead set on getting you into a war with Russia. Now there is a new issue, and that is this, and that appeared in the past week, and that is the relationship between Russia and China. Now, I don't care how loyal Western supporter you are, or in what dreamland you live, but if you think for one moment that the West is a match for Russia and China, you better stop the drugs that you are using, because there is no way. And I'm just talking about Russia and China. The reality is, the rest of the world is done with the West. Is done with the West. You can see it. And the West, as it is, roughly is 20% of the world's population. The other 80% is against you. Think about that. A war with either Russia or China will be the end of the West. And we must pray that nuclear arms does not come into play. Because if nuclear arms comes into play, it's the end of the world. But the Russians and the Chinese will sweep the West off the maps in a conventional war. It is clear. The West is no match for them anymore. No longer. Those days are over. We can see it in the fact that Ukraine is running out of ammunition. By definition, NATO and America is running out of ammunition. And the reality and the ugly part is they don't have the production capacity to maintain the ammunition consumption. Whereas Russia and China can easily do it. So I'm saying again, Europe, what have you done? You have done this to yourselves. You have allowed that sick cabal in Brussels to really destroy everything that is European. It's EU here, EU there, EU everywhere. Tell me, what is the traditional dish of the EU? What is the traditional language of the EU? What is your cultural history? What? How do I see, if I see a person, how can I know he's from the EU? I can see when a guy's from Germany or from Italy or from England. And when he puts food on the table, I can see it. The EU is nothing. It's a name. But it's a tool. And that tool is destroying ordinary Europeans. And if the Europeans do not open their eyes and wake up and take control of their lives back, get your independence back. You are not independent, you are vassals of the Americans. Your leadership, listen to that Briekmerke. She goes to Kiev and says openly, I don't care what the voters say. I say Germany will support Kiev till the end. What is that? That's not a democracy. But you talk a lot about democracies. What is that leader of yours? What the type of man is he? He knows that the Americans blew your gas pipelines up, but he doesn't say a word. And the most pathetic of all is that the Europeans don't want to support the motion in the UN to investigate the pipelines. Why? What the hell is that? It is your pipelines that has been blown up. But you are slaves of the Americans. You sold yourself to the highest bidder, and you're going to regret this. I don't know where Europe is going to end. There was many documents last year already saying that Europe is going to go to a third world. But what is a third world? The third world is not enough jobs, not enough energy, not enough food, not enough housing. Look around you and see if that is valid. Think about this. Europe, what have you done? Please give me a like, subscribe, and share the thing.